So it is currently 11 o'clock at night, the day before the event, and we are here for a much anticipated one-on-one game.
Between who?
Between you and
Me and
Pastor
who?
Francis.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say you. I have a little more confidence against a pastor.
What do you think Pastor Francis's weaknesses are?
His weakness? Wow, it's hard to say. I don't really know what his weaknesses are, but I do have a strategy to try to like throw him off. I can imagine that he's never played against like, you know, a freestyle rapper before, right?
I don't think so.
So I think in any moment I might just start freestyling.
Game to 5, what's the final score?
I'm going MC Jin 4-1.
Game to 5.
What do you mean game? I thought you meant
Game to 5. Someone has to hit 5. not 5 shots, and how did you make?
Okay,
Game to 5.
My bad. I was playing Miami rules. I think 5-1 then. All right, final score. That's what you're asking, right?
You're correct. 5-1.
Okay, 5-1. I think I'm going 5-1 MC Jin.
All right.
All right, cool.
So what are your strengths as a player? What do you think his weaknesses are? How are you going to expose him? How are you going to win?
You know, I mean, he's younger. I just turned 50, but you know, I've always been a power player. I've been compared to like Shaq type of, you know, I just kind of have my way with little guys like Jin, you know, just like. So, you know, he's gonna try to run around. Oh, I got more energy, but he can't come inside of my kitchen. It's like, 呢個係我個廚房啊。
Oh,
係啊，
哇，講中文啦。
係啊，呢啲啊。
All right, nice. Have you done any special preparation? Have you worked out or have you prayed?
You know, I actually did pray about this. You know, I'm trying to show humility and everything. I know it's not coming off right now, but it probably will during the game. But no, I'm prepared.
And game to 5, what's the final prediction?
I'm representing Golden State, so I would say 5-2. This is for all the pride of California.
Sounds good.
Oh, he thought I was passing it. Howard. Oh.
I said 5-1 though. I said 5-1, so that makes sense.
Right?
I'm ready.
1-0.
Oh! What?
This is all for entertainment anyways.
Yo, 3-0.
Oh man.
How long have you been at the gym, man? I just walked in. My sneakers are still chilly right now. Clear it?
Yep.
Shooter.
Okay, 3-1.
Oh no, hold on. Oh!
Hey, it's still in play, right? Trying to play D and you're looking at the ball. Guess what happens when I cross the don't fall? Oh! See that? See what happened? All it took was 2 bars. Imagine if I did a whole 16. Forget about it.
3-2.
And I'm not talking about John 3:16 either. Yeah, I know John 3:16, but he so loved the earth that he sent his only the world, the earth, everything. Am I going in? Am I going up for the shot? Wait, 3-2 me?
No.
Oh,
No,
okay.
He ripped off 3 straight. Oh, he's a man. I'm a rapper. Ask him, hey, so it's 4-2, it's game point. Francis is up, he just needs one more bucket.
What did the prophet say earlier? 5-2.
Look, anybody that knows me knows that I perform well under pressure.
Here we go.
All right, this is it. Oh! Yeah, here we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
4-3.
Soft.
4-3.
That's nice.
Straight 5, right?
Yeah.
Straight 5, I'm calling it now.
Yeah.
Money.
Oh, this is legitimately, we are not staging this. This is happening right now. It is 4-4. A lot of trash talk, but a lot of deep breaths. My analysis, Francis can't go left, and Jin's not as fast as he advertised.
Talk to this guy. Talk to San Fran real quick.
Oh, I'll play defense now.
This is where I pull
He
out
thinks
my
I can't
ultimate
play
secret
defense.
weapon.
I'll show you defense.
You thought the freestyling was the secret weapon? That's not it.
Let's go, bring it.
Check this out.
Seriously, bring it. No, I'm serious now.
What?
Bring it.
我而家用廣東話。
等乜嘢啊？等乜嘢？你傻啦？
同我打籃球。
喂，你swat你個波，你swat死你啊！swat死你啊！
This one's for the Great Commission. Just pull up. Pull up.
What do I tell you?
Is it my turn? Post-game interview? All right, let me speak from the heart. Speak from the heart. This game was not about victory. It was about humility. And for all the young people that are watching right now, look at my eyes. You know what this is? Humility. I gotta give it up. Pastor Francis, you got that. I'm gonna come back next year.
No, Jen, that was a great effort. You look really cute out there. I can tell you really enjoy the game of basketball. Great try, little buddy.
Oh man, that was oh dude, that was hilarious. If you guys could have been there last night, we cut out a little bit of there was a lot of trash talks. We had to cut out some of that. We had to cut out some of the misses, but man, they were breathing hard, and they gave their best effort, and that was one of the funniest things I've ever witnessed. So, congratulations, you guys, and Pastor Francis. That's pretty impressive basketball. So today, I'm just gonna give a short sharing. It's not gonna be too long. I just kind of want to talk about my journey in the NBA and just all the different things that I've learned. And, I'm going to, very similar to Jin, it's going to be an abbreviated version, so I'm going to fly through a lot of different details. But I grew up in California, and who's from California? All right, not a lot of Cali pride. I went to school in Boston, and I went to Harvard, and I'm not even joking, I did not want to go to Harvard. I wanted to stay in California mainly just because good weather, my family, my friends, In-N-Out Burger. Anybody know In-N-Out Burger? There we go. All right, my tangent. In-N-Out Burger is better than Five Guys. In-N-Out Burger is better than Shake Shack. I don't want to hear it. Coming from Cali, that's just what we believed. So I went to school at Harvard, and I graduated, and I decided to, go for the NBA, which at that time was just not normal. The last Asian American player to play in the NBA was like 55 years ago. The last Harvard player to play in the NBA was 60 years ago. So the odds were definitely against me, and I just remember. Going through this journey, and God, orchestrated a lot of different things. I made to the NBA, and I signed with the Golden State Warriors. And I remember my first season, it was rough. It was really rough. I went to the D League. I ended up getting cut twice, fired basically. I got fired twice, and I ended up right here. Well, not right here. Across the bridge, Manhattan, with the New York Knicks. And I'm about to leave. We're in Brooklyn right now. Where are my Nets fans at, man? So I ended up with the Knicks, and as we know, I did not plant this guy. I promise I didn't plant him. But the whole insanity thing happened. And that's probably the most impactful, that's probably the craziest thing that's ever happened in my life. And a lot of times people ask me, what was that like? What do you remember? What did you learn? And there's really, only two things that I significantly remember from that time. Number one, is that miracles do exist. I always knew, if I look around, I always knew there were miracles. Like, if you look at the world, right? I did my Harvard thing. I looked up yesterday, how much does the earth weigh? And I don't even know how to pronounce the number because there's so many zeros, but there's 25 zeros on this number, but a planet that big, perfectly orbiting around the sun, and one planet closer it's too hot, one planet, away is too cold, and we're perfect in the middle. We're somehow orbiting around it. We have life, our human bodies. Like if you study the body, these are miracles that I've seen. So I've always understood the concept of miracles. I read the Bible, but Linsanity was a personal miracle, right? That was a personal miracle that I felt because I knew, and I went home and I made a list of the things that needed to happen in order for Linsanity to happen, and I came up with, I think, 13 things that had nothing to do with me, whether it's running into somebody at the right time, whether it's getting cut on this day, but if I had gotten cut the previous day, New York wouldn't have been able to pick me up. There's a lot of different things that had happened. Someone got injured, I got into this position. God orchestrated Linsanity. There's no doubt in my mind that it's beyond my control. If I could go back and recreate it as hard as I worked and all that, it was God's miracle. So that's the first thing, absolutely. And that's the first thing that I learned. And, even through it, people when they, watch my documentary, they watch these games, they see my demeanor, and they see me on the court, very stoic, making game-winning plays, things like that. But I could tell you, inside, there was so much fear, there was so much doubt, there was so much anxiety, because I felt like my NBA dream was about to be over. And the thing that I want to encourage you guys with is miracles do happen, but you don't have to be perfect, right? Like, you can have fear, you can have doubt, but as long as you walk in God's footsteps and you walk in the path that He's called you to, He will use you, and you are capable, even if you're not perfect, even if you have fear, even if you have doubt. Sometimes it's taking one scared step forward. And that's the thing that I learned through Linsanity was I was so fearful during that time because, I thought I was sleeping on my brother's couch. That's how not confident I was that I was going to keep my job. I was sleeping on my brother's couch. I didn't even get my own apartment because I knew it was going to be a waste of money. I thought they were going to cut me, but through my fear and doubt, God used me. So that's the first thing. The second thing I learned, and this is probably the most meaningful lesson for me, is just how fleeting earthly success really is. At that time, life was crazy. We heard Jin talk a lot about it. The money, the fame, I can't think of it. I mean, everything. Like, I was literally the most popular person on the planet. It was me and Gangnam Style. It was me and him. We were killing it. Shout out to the Asians. It was literally, somebody was like, hey, come here, sign autographs, and we'll give you a BMW 7 Series. Come live at this penthouse apartment for free for the rest of the season. Come do this, come do that, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. I had endorsement deals, I had a big contract that I was gonna come up and sign. I had a lot of fame. Everywhere we would go, everybody following us. It was a dream situation. And on top of that, I was playing great basketball. I solidified myself as an NBA player. I secured my dream, right? But 2 weeks later, we were playing Derrick Rose in the Chicago Bulls. And we were playing in Chicago. And I remember this moment is as vivid as my game winner against Toronto, as my 38 points against the Lakers. Shout out to NorCal. But I remember before the game, I was trying to take a pregame nap, but I couldn't really sleep because I was just so anxious. I had so much anxiety, and I was thinking to myself, I'm so empty right now. Like, this is actually miserable. And I remember 2 weeks into Linsanity, feeling that, and I was just like, if Linsanity is not enough, like, to keep me happy, if it's only enough to keep me happy for 2 weeks, like, I really need to reevaluate my life. And so the one thing that I want to share with you guys is I reached a pinnacle of success beyond what I ever thought I could achieve. And even then, it still wasn't enough. And there was an empty void inside of me. And so that's when I had to really reevaluate what does success mean, right? Like, what does success mean? Because I see we turned Brooklyn Tabernacle into an Asian church today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Asian culture. But what does society tell us? It's get good grades in high school, get to the best college, SAT prep, all that, get to the best college, get good grades, get the best job, get a promotion, keep rising the ranks, make solid money, find a great wife, have kids, start a family, and then when you have kids, make sure your kids get good grades in high school, they get to a good college, right? It's a cycle. It never ends. It just keeps going. And I think that's the one thing I learned through Linsanity was it's just a never-ending cycle of chasing. And if I spend my whole life chasing, when am I really gonna feel that fulfillment, that purpose, that joy, that peace? And so that's one thing that I really had to check within myself because my old goals were to be a starter. My old goals was to make it in the NBA. I was a starter. I was in the NBA. And I had new goals. I want to be an all-star. I want to win a championship. So I just replaced my old goals with newer goals. And I think you guys can all relate to that to some degree is when you've achieved something, when you've received something, there's another level that you just get to. And we could spend our whole lives trying to be the prettiest girl, the most popular guy, the most respected businessman, whatever it is, like the most followers on social media, whatever thing you're chasing, I just want you to know when you get it, it's not gonna be enough. So that's the one thing I really learned from the Linsanity is just, even through all of this, beyond my wildest dreams, it just wasn't enough. And so I was kind of left in a position where I had to redefine success, and I had to refine that peace that I had because it made no sense that right before a big game against the Chicago Bulls with the entire world tuning in to watch, that I was extremely, extremely empty inside. And so that takes me through the next 3 years where I spent with the Houston Rockets and the LA Lakers. And, I read every once in a while, and there's this book by John Bevere, and he says, the church has two types of people. Those who seek God for what he can do or what he can give, and then those who seek God for who he is, right? And so there's a big difference because some people are seeking a gift, something they can get back, a blessing, a reward, favor, and then some people are seeking the giver, right? The giver himself, God. And that's the one thing that I noticed in this course of me coming up and rising with this fame was I lost sight of the giver and I was so focused on the gift. And the anxiety that I felt was because I wanted to be Linsanity. I wanted to be this person who everybody thought I could be. I wanted to live up to my fans' hype. I wanted to prove the haters wrong. I was just so focused on the platform. I was so focused on what I had been given that I lost sight of God. I have a nephew. He's 1 year old, baby, just started walking. And I love him to death. I think he's awesome. But if I was real with myself, he doesn't really know who I am. And he doesn't really like me that much. And the only way I could get him to hang out with me or to take a picture with me is I dangle blueberries in front of him. Because he's obsessed with blueberries. So I'm like, Jaden, blueberry. He's like, he starts coming for the blueberry, and then I feed him blueberries until he can't eat anymore, and then he's kind of onto the next thing. He's onto the next toy, right? And so, as sad as it sounds, that's kind of how I was treating God. It was just like, I'm going for the blueberries. I'm not going for the actual, that relationship with him. And I think that's, when God, very similar to Jin, which is kind of why I really appreciate this event, doing with Jin and Francis, is we have all experienced to some degree, this peak of success, and then kind of the aftermath of it and what it means for us in our lives. And so, God slowly started to strip away everything that he had given me. I was a starter, and I became, a bench player. I was loved by everybody. I was so embraced by the fans, and I started to get a ton of hate, a ton of criticism as time went on. I had a huge platform, and I saw that begin to shrink. I had endorsement companies, just everyone lined up trying to get me to represent their brand. That started to dry up. And then it kind of culminated when I was with the Lakers, and there was one game where I was completely healthy and I didn't play at all. So I didn't even get in the game. And I remember that moment, it was, before Linsanity, I was not playing at all. I was on the bench, no playing time. I reached this huge peak of success, and I was back to not playing at all. I was back to ground zero. And it was this huge, volatile roller coaster of nothing, everything, nothing from a worldly perspective, right? And I remember in that moment I felt like the question that God was really asking me is, am I enough? Like, is God enough for you? Is God enough for me? And just God, not everything else that you may have, just God. And so he peeled away all the distractions. He took them away. As I was trying to hold on to everything, he took all of that away. And he asked me, am I enough? And that's what I had to really wrestle with. And it took a lot of forced humility. And I had to get to a point where I was like, you know what, God? This whole thing, I can't control. This whole thing is in your hands. I got to give it up to you. And so I just started to focus a lot on who God is, right? Like God's love, which Francis is going to talk about in a little bit, God's grace, God's just all the characteristics of who God is, how much he loves me, the relationship. You know, and so that took me, I felt like I really established that in Charlotte the next season with the Hornets, and it carried it over into last season with the Nets. And, the Nets, we didn't do that great last year. We got 30th out of 30 teams. And I was hurt for over half the season, just watching from the sideline. But even in all that junk that I went through last season, I had more peace, more joy, more purpose than I did in the middle of insanity. You know, and I showed up every day to work, and I'm not saying it wasn't hard. It was hard. There were trials. But for the first time, I felt like I was really riding above my circumstances. Like, whatever was going on in my world, ups, downs, up, down, like, my peace, my purpose, my joy, my life, like, my fulfillment, my satisfaction level was above it. And so whatever would happen, I used to go up and down with my life. Now, I was above it, and I don't get me wrong, I would get sad, but immediately go back to the Word, go back to prayer, and I'd receive a lot of peace. You know, I think that's kind of the one thing that, like, it's like I'm not a preacher, I'm not like a Bible scholar, but the one thing I can give you is my experience, as Jin was saying. Experience. My experience is I've experienced the lows, I've experienced the highs, and my highs may be, from a worldly perspective, more successful than a lot of you guys have ever experienced just from a pure earthly materialistic success standpoint. But even through all that, I realized, I learned, man, when I have my relationship with God, like all this other stuff, it doesn't really matter. That's the most important thing. That's what's going to sustain me. And, I just finished a book by Tim Keller, and he said, and he asked everyone, I want you to think about your soul. Mark 8:36 says, what good would it do to gain the whole world but forfeit your soul? Right? What good would it do to gain the whole world but forfeit your soul? And Tim Keller gives this analogy about your soul being like a boat. And the boat, is just you in it. You got 2 oars, you have a sail. And he says your soul could be in 4 different states. You could be sailing, so you're rowing, get the wind behind you, you're sailing, everything's smooth, you're praying, you're reading scripture, you're doing all these different things, and things are smooth, right? You're sailing. And then you could be rowing. You could be rowing, giving your effort, doing these things, but the winds, the waves, the trials, the tribulations of life, they keep coming, and you look around and you realize you're not going anywhere. You're just rowing, but you're in the same spot. Then the third one is drifting, where you're not even rowing anymore. You're just the wind, the waves, they're just taking you. Life's just taking you wherever the course it may be, and you're not fighting, you're just kind of going with it. And then the last one is sinking. Right? The last one is sinking, where basically you're numb to God. You're completely hardened in heart, and you're just sinking. You're not going anywhere. You're not rowing. You're just sinking. And, this is hard for me to do, and I was kind of talking about it with Jin and Francis earlier, but, I usually share my struggles and my weaknesses, after the fact. Like, hey, I was idolizing Linsanity. Hey, I was idolizing basketball. Hey, I wasn't paying attention to God, or my priorities were mixed up. It's easy to talk about it after the fact, but I do want to share about just my personal struggles today. Is I feel like this summer, or at least the last 4 to 6 weeks, I've been between, drifting and rowing. Like, I go through some serious times of apathy, where my priorities are mixed up, where I'm not being, I'm not in my word, I'm not spending time with God. Like that's me right now, today, yesterday, tomorrow. Like this is where I'm at in my life. And I want to be real with you guys. Like I'm not, a lot of people hype me up to be this role model for Christians and whatever. No, I'm a 29-year-old male who struggles and fights and has to seek God every day and goes through some serious valleys, goes through some serious times where I'm on fire for God. But this is who I am, and this is a real part of my journey, is I am currently like not on fire for God. And I love God, I know, and it's like any relationship, right? Like if you're married or if you have a spouse or you're a significant other, your love for them, or to prove your love, it's not like if I'm married, and let's say, hypothetically, I'm not, but I don't have a wife, but let's say I have a wife and I do my job, I take the trash out, I do the dishes, I do these things. That doesn't mean that I love my wife, right? Like me doing those things doesn't mean I love my wife, but if I love my wife, then I would do these things, right? So what I'm basically trying to say is, just because you read the Bible or you pray does not mean that you actually love God. But if you really, really love God, you will naturally want to read the Bible, want to pray, go to church, do these things, right? And so that's part of rowing, is God doesn't always expect us to be sailing, but we should always be rowing. And it should come from a love that we have for God. And so that's the fight that I'm having right now, is I know I love God, but sometimes I'm not doing the things I need to, and so there's a heart check that needs to happen. And so the one thing I can encourage you guys with is, if you're not a believer, just take it from me, someone who has achieved a lot and set a lot of, records and broken a lot of barriers. Success, this earth, there's nothing this earth can give you that's gonna be enough for you. I can promise you that, because you're just gonna chase the next thing. Like there's not one thing. It could be the perfect spouse, it could be the perfect job, it could be the whatever, but once you get that job, you're gonna wanna do well. And you wanna eventually have a new goal. So take it from me that whatever you go through, you have to figure out deep down inside, like, why am I living? What is my purpose? Where is my joy coming from? Because we all worship something, whether it's ourselves, whether it's God, whether it's our job, whether it's our family, whether it's money, whether it's sex, whether it's nightlife. Like, we all worship something. So what are you worshiping? What is your identity in? That would be my question to you guys. There's cards, you can fill them out, right? Like, take a step of faith today, even if it's in fear. And if you are a believer, my challenge to you would be the same challenge I would say to myself right now in my battle with spiritual apathy is, are you on fire for God, or are you lukewarm? Because the Bible says if we're lukewarm in faith, we will be spit out. And that's a real verse. And so where are you in your faith? Are you living radically? Are you doing everything to give your life to God in every facet? Not just maybe in time, but what about money? What about heart? What about attitude? Right? Like, what are you doing every day? How are you seeking God? And I think the cool thing is Francis is gonna come up here right now, and he's gonna expound on just who God is, his love, his mercy, and what that looks like. He's gonna take you guys through, just why would we want to love God? Why would we want to serve God? And so with that, I just want to bring up Francis. Thank you guys for taking the time to listen.